Serenity is one of the best comedies to come out this January. Granted, it's not supposed to be a comedy, but it sure does feel like one. Serenity is quite the weird movie to describe because it's one of those movies that needs to be seen to be believed what happens in it. But I'll try to give a brief synopsis of the film. Essentially, it is advertised as a thriller. Now, Matthew McConaughey is our main character in the film, and he is obsessed with catching a tuna almost as large as his boat. So in a way, it almost starts off feeling like a fantasy film, like the fisherman and this mythical creature that he wants to catch. But his ex-wife comes into play, and then it turns into a film noir film, where Anne Hathaway is his ex-wife. She's sort of the femme fatale, and she's got this new husband that's abusive to both her and the son that her and Matthew McConaughey made. This new husband is played by Jason Clarke, and he's pretty much a Cuban mob boss in a way, or something like that. She offered Matthew McConaughey $10 million to kill her new husband. And it's pretty simple. She already said that she would hire a boat to take him out into the ocean so that he could fish for them. So all Matthew McConaughey has to do is push him off the boat and feed him to the sharks. But of course, Matthew McConaughey is a little conflicted about murdering a person, no matter how abusive and how nasty that character is. But eventually, a twist in the movie happens, and you realize that none of this really matters. Serenity is such a bizarre film, but my cousin and I, we were completely entertained by it. See, we went on Tuesday, where it was only $5 a ticket, and we went during a time when it was extremely cold out. In Illinois, it was, or in my area of Illinois, it was pretty crazy weather in terms of the temperature. In fact, the last couple of days had been in the negatives. But we ventured the storm because we were curious about this movie and we heard it was so hilariously bad. And I gotta say, we did not stop laughing during this movie. In fact, when we got out of the theater, my cousin said that he had never laughed so hard in a movie theater since game night. And game night, we laughed at every scene. I do have some legitimately good things to say about the movie. For one, it seemed like all the people creating this movie were very passionate, and it almost felt like the studios really backed this film up, at least when it was in the filming process, because you would never guess that this movie is just so bizarre and crazy, because all the set designs, the setting, the acting, it's all actually really good. Now, granted, all these big name actors, they go over the top and extreme, but they're still acting their ass off. It's almost like they wanted an Oscar for this movie. And there's not too many visual effects, but when they are in it, they are actually good. Granted, some of the visual effects, especially the giant tuna, and when it first shows up, it's displayed like it's something goofy, but the visual effects themselves are decent. It's just presented in a goofy way. There was definitely money backing this film up. There was definitely passion backing this film up. It's just that the plot and the scenes and everything is just so damn crazy. Plus, I had a great time watching this film. Granted, it's at the film's expense, but I had a great time watching the film and laughing my ass off. So it was good in that way. Now, the main bad thing about this movie, the reason that it's so hilariously bad, is the plot. But I'll go into detail a little bit towards the end of the review, because I do have spoilers. I do have to talk about the spoilers because, again, it's one of those movies that's so impossible to describe without talking about the spoilers, because it's one of those movies that has to be seen to be believed. This movie, the way it's filmed and the way it's edited is nice, but at that same time, there are moments throughout the film where it feels like you're watching a comedy. From both the editing, the musical score, and even the camera work. Let's talk about the score first, because that was the first mind-blowing thing in the movie for me. When the movie opens up, it opens up in such an epic way. It's one of those films where the camera's in the ocean at the very beginning. Actually, no, at the very beginning of the movie, we see the face of a boy and it zooms into that boy's eye, and then we're underwater. I'll get into more about the boy, but we're underwater, and then the camera comes out of the water, and it's one of those movements of the camera where it's going across the ocean, and so you can see mostly the ocean, and the title of the film fades in and in a way where it's almost coming out of the ocean. And as it's zooming along, you can see a little bit towards the horizon, and you can see a boat that it's zooming in. So it's got that very epic shot, and at that same time, the score is just so mind-blowingly epic. It's something you'd expect on this high seas adventure type movie, or maybe this epic fantasy movie. You got drums that are banging just like the drums on Jumanji, basically, and you got this epic score going along with it. It's like, oh wow, we're in for a treat. We're in for something epic. What does it have to offer to us? And finally it gets to the boat, and instead of showing something epic like the music would suggest, you see two guys passed out, drunk on the back of a boat, beer falling from their hands. They're just passed out, and a bunch of fishing poles. That's about it. It doesn't match the epic score this movie has. In fact, a lot of the epic score in this movie feels so misplaced. And at times, you can't even hear dialogue from our characters or our actors because the music is just so loud and epic. There's also these little camera movements in the movie. Well, they're not little. They're just questionably weird. And there's times when characters are introduced from behind, and then the camera does this very weird twirl around. It's not like a constant twirl around. It's like this jerky twirl around where it goes really fast, then slow, fast, slow, fast. It's really weird. And it's almost like it's digitally made, the camera movement. It is bizarre. And it does it about 4 times, and a lot of it is introducing the characters. And it's just like, wait, whoa, what, huh? It's just crazy. The editing sometimes feels like it's the editing that is meant for a comedy. Let me give you one example. This was the first edit that felt like a comedy to me, where Matthew McConaughey is unable to catch this tuna, and so he has to go back into shore, and it's a little depressing for him because the people that paid him to take them out into the ocean so that they could fish want a refund or don't want to pay him because Matthew McConaughey spent most of the time trying to catch this giant fish and not them. So as he's coming towards the docks, it cuts to this man in a suit with a briefcase and very small oval, circle glasses, and he's staring out into the ocean. You get a close-up of him just like suddenly, and he's like this goofy, weird, nerdy-looking person in a suit, and he's on the beach, and he's looking out into the ocean. And then it cuts back to the ship coming in, and then it cuts back to our geeky-looking guy, and he's like, I think he like looks at his watch and is like either, oh, he's on time, or, oh, that's a little odd, he's not on time. And then he starts walking, and there's in this beach, there's like 2 small beaches and a little bit of some water, kind of like a stream or a river between these 2 small beaches. And so he goes towards the edge of the water, and he meticulously takes off both of his shoes and socks. And it takes a while for him to do this. And so we're like, okay, that's weird. Well, maybe it's just he doesn't want to get his shoes wet, and maybe the water's only foot deep, like up to his ankles or something like that. So then it cuts back to the boat coming in, And then when you get an immediate cut back to the man in the suit, he's halfway across the stream, waist deep in water. And I'm like, what? My cousin and I, we laughed. It felt like a little comedy joke. It felt like a comedic cut. Just like, oh, look, he didn't have to take off his shoes. Look, he's waist deep in water. Ha, 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 ha. It's kind of like that. It is very bizarre because it's clearly not meant to be, but it feels like it is. There's a few weird cuts, and almost every time that this guy in the suit and glasses shows up, which they call the skinny man, okay, every time he shows up, he's just like looking at Matthew McConaughey, and he just comes out of nowhere like he's some weird secret FBI agent spying on Matthew McConaughey's character for some reason, or at least it seems like that. And there's a bunch of times where he's trying to get to Matthew McConaughey and talk to him, but he just misses him like mere seconds every time. And he's like, darn, he's like 2 seconds early than usual. This isn't good. This is bad. This is very bad. And I'm like, who are you and what's going on? We were laughing every time he was on screen on it. I think when it comes to the technical aspects, that's the only thing I can think of that was hilariously bad. But it's mostly because of the plot, because of the scenes and the overacting and just the bizarre craziness that happens throughout the film. Like, you get crazy McConaughey in this movie when he's introduced trying to catch this giant fish. And because it's on the people's line that he's taking people... See, he's taking tourists out so they could fish. And he's not supposed to really fish because he's getting paid for them to fish. Oh, and by the way, this big fish, they always know it's around because apparently this one bird is always flying in the air whenever the tuna is around. And they're like, oh, he's here. He's here. That bird's up there, so that tuna's down there somewhere. And so, of course, the tuna bites, and the drunk guy wakes up. He's like, hey, I got a fish. I got a fish. Awesome. And Matthew McConaughey takes it, and he hooks it, and he's ready to reel it in. And the guy's like, hey, let me reel it in. This is my catch. I paid you so that we could come out here and catch. It's like, no, get away from me. He's mine. He's mine. And then at one point, the other guy's like, dude, it's my brother's fish. Let him reel it in. And Matthew McConaughey takes out a knife and he's like, stay away from that fucking line. This is my fucking fish. You have crazy McConaughey in this movie when he's introduced like that, and he does not disappoint. I'd say he's just as entertaining as Nicolas Cage crazy. He is insane in this movie. He's also so ridiculously out of money because he's so obsessed with catching this tuna. And sometimes for money, he has to actually prostitute himself to this other woman. And there's this ridiculous line in the movie where she says that he's a prostitute, or calls him a prostitute. And he goes, yeah, I'm a hooker that can't afford hooks. It's ridiculous. And it's played so straight. But yeah, when he's down on his luck finally, Anne Hathaway shows up as his ex-wife. And the way she's introduced is with that weird camera angle that I was telling earlier, where it like zooms around her. But it starts off with her back turned to the camera, and she's got her hand up, and there's a ring. And so you see this ring facing the camera. There's an actual bling, like visual effect on the frickin' ring. And it even like, I think there's even a sound effect. It's like ding, and then it zooms around her, and then she tells him, "All right, you can kill my husband, and I'll give you $10 million." Oh, and Jason Clarke is so over the top in this movie. He plays a character that you're clearly not supposed to like, but there's like no redeemable thing about him. There's like nothing he says in the movie that is anything remotely nice. Everything he says in this movie is just completely despicable, disgusting, horrible. He is ridiculously over the top in this movie. But then again, all the acting is over the top in this movie, and that helps it be even more entertaining. Now then, eventually some really crazy things start happening. If it wasn't crazy enough, suddenly Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey's son, well, the son, it keeps going back to the son every so often. He was the kid at the very beginning where it zooms into his eye, and every time it shows him, he's on the computer, and I think one of the times it introduces that he's on the computer is ridiculous. You know how in movies, when people are reading a book at night and they're supposed to be in bed, they put the covers over them, they have a flashlight, and they're reading under the covers? It kind of does it for this, but except it's with a computer. He's in his chair at the computer, at a computer desk with a big monitor, and there's a huge blanket wrapped over the computer monitor and over him, and it's so stupid. It is so stupid. But at one point, the girl that Matthew McConaughey has sex with for money, she comes over to see him, and he just starts stripping naked, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I got to take a shower." And so he goes out of his house, and it does that weird zoom around him, completely naked. And my cousin and I were just laughing. We're like, what the hell is going on? And he just walks over to a cliff, jumps into the ocean, and that's his shower, I guess. And as he's underwater, these bubbles start forming, and the bubbles turn into a naked version of his son. And he starts swimming to his son, and his son is reaching out for him under the water. And then he wakes up, and he's all wet. And the son wakes up from the computer, and his hand is wet because the bottle was spilled. And they're like rubbing. Matthew McConaughey's rubbing the desk where there's a puddle, and so is the kid. And they're like, "Do you feel this, Dad? I think I feel you." And it's like, wait, they have a telepathic link somehow? Oh no, it's not, but it gets better. It gets freaking better. So Jason Clarke comes to the island early, and he actually goes on one boat ride with Matthew McConaughey, and Matthew McConaughey doesn't kill him because he still refuses to kill this guy. And that's when Jason Clarke starts talking about the son that Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway had, because he doesn't realize this is the ex-husband. And he's talking about how weird his son is and how he won't even play baseball, and he's just in his bed. He's in his bedroom all day on this computer doing weird fishing game stuff. And that's when I started to realize, well, I knew the twist going in, which made this even more hilarious to me, but my cousin had not seen the twist, and I'm like, okay, clearly he's gonna figure it out from this. And I look over at him, and he like looks over at me and like he rolls his eyes, and he's like, at first I thought he realized the twist, but when we came out of the theater, he realized where it was leading to, but he didn't think they would actually pull it off and actually go the way that it's leading to. And it turns out, oh, this movie does. Here's the thing. Halfway through the movie, give or take, Matthew McConaughey finally talks to the guy that's been after him all the time, this guy in the suit and glasses. And he lets him have a drink, and this guy is saying, "Here, I'm going to give you this test run of this fish finder. Just put in whatever fish you want, and it shows you exactly where it is. So you can finally catch that tuna," which, by the way, Matthew McConaughey calls it justice. He calls the fish justice. Oh, and that comes into play later on, trust me. And eventually he gets him drunk enough that the guy in the suit says something like, "I am the rules." So this is when you find out in the movie that the fishing town, the island, the tuna, the Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, Jason Clarke, Everyone except the kid on the computer is just a computer simulation. That's right. All this was created by this kid who lost his father in Iraq, who was Matthew McConaughey, and he created this simulation where he could make his father and this fishing town and all this other stuff. And eventually he actually does have a stepfather who is abusive. And so he added that character to the game so that Matthew McConaughey in the game could kill Jason Clarke, and then that would give the boy the courage to kill his stepfather in real life with a knife. And they don't have a telepathic link. It's just the kid is adding code to this computer simulation, and eventually they can somehow communicate through the computer. It's insanity. Once you realize this, once this happens in the movie, the last third of the movie, give or take, it goes from, the movie was already crazy. On a crazy scale out of 10, the movie was an 8 throughout most of the movie. Then the twist happens, and it gradually goes higher until it's like a 15 on the crazy level out of 10. Everything just goes batshit crazy because finally Matthew McConaughey realizes he's in a computer simulation, but no one else does. And the rules are you can't kill in this computer simulation. And so everyone is trying to stop him from killing this person because either they don't know and they're programmed to try to stop him, or they do know and they're trying to do things to stop him. One character hires people to break Jason Clarke's hand so that he can't go on the trip, and that way Matthew McConaughey can't kill him. But then Anne Hathaway's like, no, we have to kill this guy because that's what the kid wants. And so she's getting him drunk and just pouring booze into his mouth as she's saying, oh, daddy, daddy, I wanted you to catch that big fish for me. You got to catch the big fish. And Jason Clarke, all drunk, is like, all right, I'll catch that fucking fish. Oh, God, fucking fuck. It's insanity. And then eventually he gets pulled under by the tuna by them putting a harness on him, strapping the pole to his crotch. And then when the tuna bites, they let him go, and he goes flying into the ocean, and he's dragged into the ocean by a fish called Justice. And he's just like, and he's tracking down. It's the whole movie just goes insane. And my cousin and I, we just could not stop laughing. It even goes crazier after that. Is mind-boggling. This movie has to be seen to be believed. Oh God, and then there's this one dramatic moment that just comes out of nowhere, and it's so weird. Anne Hathaway still is trying to get Matthew McConaughey to agree to this, and so she shows up, starts reminiscing about their past, and it makes it look like she's trying to seduce him so that he could kill Jason Clarke and agree to this proposition. Turns out she actually does still love Matthew McConaughey, but the scene makes it look like she's just doing that to seduce him. And finally he's like, no, I'm not going to do this, and this isn't for love. Actually, I am going to do this, but it's not for love. I'm doing this for my son because I don't want him to be abused anymore. And she's like, okay. And then they start having sex, very animalistic like, almost to the point where Matthew McConaughey has like Anne Hathaway's lower jaw completely in his mouth and this weird kiss, and they just start having sex just out of nowhere. And then before it could be finished, Matthew McConaughey pulls out, and she's looking stunned, and he starts pulling his pants up, and he goes, there, I beat him, I won, get out. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened there? This movie is insanity. It is ridiculous. It is mind-boggling. This movie has to be seen to be believed. And if you're a fan of movies that are ridiculous and you get to laugh at their expense, Serenity might be for you. In the end, I'm actually going to give Serenity 3 stars. Again, it's a bad movie, but it's entertainingly so and completely fascinating. So here's what it really is. The critical score for this movie is about 1.5 out of 5. It is a bad movie, but there are some technical merits to it. But on my pure enjoyment level on how bad it was and how entertainingly bad it was, it's a 4 out of 5. So ultimately it averages out to about a 3 star. So that's what I'm giving Serenity. And if you're like these kind of movies, go ahead and see this in theaters. It's probably not going to last long. So, did you see Serenity? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews or countdowns of this year, of previous years, of whatever. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was